I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, March the 28th. And so much for the spring rally in the cattle market. We thought we could gain quite a bit of ground here this spring with all the things that were in the favor. The worst winter in recent memory, the horrible devastating floods, and all the death loss. We know there was way over 1 million head of cattle. Some say just in Nebraska. Okay, if you don't believe that, let's talk about the rest of the northern plains where they had such bad winter and everything. We know if not just through the floods, through the winter we lost that many cattle. Everything just has been against the cattle feeder, and you would think the market would be in its favor. We had that little bitty kind of a bearish cattle on feed report that seemed a little suspect to many of us there last week, but shouldn't have been a big enough deal to really make a difference. And we're also looking at the global shortage of protein with China dealing with African swine fever and losing a significant portion of their herd and having to look elsewhere for some pork, which is a good competitor of beef, and it should help. But all these things stacked up in the cattleman's favor, in the cattle market's favor, and your packers got the easiest $3 lower market on a Wednesday morning than you could ever ask for if you were in their corner. And I don't even think they had to use any of their ploys or their schemes, or even look through Donald Trump's making of the deal book or anything like that to get it done. The cattle feeders were just there to puke them to them. And we'll talk about a little bit more here after we talk about the board. Look at the board for Wednesday. April live cattle futures down 65 cents at 126 1/4. June was down $1.12 at 119.60. Your August live cattle contract, look down there. We know that the market's going to head south, and it's already headed south. It headed south on Wednesday and won't be back. But we know deep in this summer it's going to get hot, and the demand is going to start to wane a little bit because it's going to get so hot. People just want to eat watermelon instead of a big heavy steak, and we know there's going to be heavy supplies of market-ready cattle and all these things. And if your cattle feeders can't do better than $1.25 or 125, when we're right here and haven't even got to the full-fledged demand from the spring yet, how in the world do they think they're going to keep it less than $8.50 good in the dead of summer? There's no way. Plus a basis. They like to keep that thing a little bit less in the market so they can have a basis too. There's no way. If this deal is as transparent as it was on Wednesday, these summer live cattle contracts are way too high. And I hate to cheer for the market to go down, but just look at it. I mean, there's no way you can hold it. We may lose $8.50 next week or the week after, the way things are going. It's absolutely ridiculous. March feeder cattle down 62 cents at 142.12. April down 32 at 145.90. Your lean hogs nearby April was up another $1.60, and we still haven't had any confirmed shipments of pork sent to China yet, but it's just it's responding to the global shortage, and you would think your cattle market would too, but no. You look at your fat cattle trade, like I said, started on Wednesday morning lower, right in the heart of your spring rally. If that doesn't make you sick to your stomach, I mean, it's like rooting for the Cleveland Browns or the Kansas Jayhawk football team or something like that, rooting for the fat cattle market to stay decent or get higher, and it just never does. It's just lower. It's a wonder that we keep it over $1, I guarantee you. But we saw significant trade start. Consolidated beef producers started pulling the plug at 126, and I knew something must have been up then, because normally they fight harder than that. Well, they had to jump in at the 126 because they had all these Kansas feeders that couldn't wait to puke them at $1.25, and they did. They started just right after that at 125, and fully $3 lower. Some of your market quotes will call it $2 lower or 2 to 3 lower. No, it's fully $3 lower, because our market was pretty darn good last week. And your 26, we had 29 last week. Your market was 28 to 29, a whole lot of 29 last week. It's full $3 lower. Texas was mostly 126, because most people sell with Consolidated Beef Producers. Few laid at 125 and looked like some kind of off quality stuff. Kansas, few 126, mostly 125 all day long, and they could not wait to give them away. And it all just had to do with your Southern Plains feeders got nervous that they had a lot of cattle ready. They had a lot of cattle on the show list, a lot of cattle ready. They know that a down market is right around the corner. We thought it was probably 1 or 2 weeks away, but it was this week because they took so much lower money. I mean, being scared of a lower market 2 or 3 weeks down the run caused them to make a lower market this week. And it's really unbelievable how easy it is for these packers to steal these cattle. They're holding their box beef cutout values at a pretty lofty rate right now, and these packer margins are cha-ching, cha-ching once again. We talked about it last year, last calendar year. They did not have a bad quarter. They didn't have a bad month. They didn't have a bad week. Be surprised if many of them had a bad day. The margins were so good all year last year, and had an all-time record low of percentage of the retail beef market that your cattle producers were receiving. But we could probably break that this year. But Nebraska sold most of their cattle at 126 to 127, which would be $2 lower, and they were basically just held hostage by the Southern Plains. Their dress trade was 206, which was $2 lower. But about 10,000 head they already had quoted on mandatory price reporting out of Nebraska. So that's sure the market. We've seen our high, which was last week, and we didn't even realize we'd gotten it. If you remember watching that report, we thought the market was 128, and it was mostly 129. But and a few deals of some clean cattle in the Northern Plains where they really needed them, hit $1.30, but you couldn't call $1.30 the market. 128 to 129 was the high for your spring 2019 rally, and it won't be back. Aside from China losing every hog that they got, and just having to scrape every other country for any morsel of meat, red meat, we're not going to be back. It's going to keep getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And like I said, how are you going to keep those August live cattle contracts in the dead of summer at 116.65 or anywhere near that if we were already heading south, and we really haven't even seen our spring grilling demand realized yet? But on top of all the misery that the north half of the 5-area feeding region has had all fall and winter and early spring long. It's unbelievable. Box beef cutout values, I told you a while ago, they've been holding real good. Wednesday afternoon, your choice cuts were $228.99. That's higher than the bulk of last week's trade, and that was down 52 cents compared to Tuesday late. Selects at $220.53, up $1.54. But slaughter moving swift, and these packers, you don't have to give your cattle away to keep the packers' chain speeds up. They need the cattle. They've already promised a lot of product out front, down the line. They've already sold it. They've already had some hiccups due to the weather and some problems that they've had keeping things going at a high rate of speed. And so, yeah, they're going to keep it going. You do not have to puke the cattle to them to keep the chain speeds up. But 358,000 through Wednesday, that was 3,000 more than a monster week last week, and 6,000 more than the same week a year ago. Give you a couple of notes there. Make note that Western Video Market is having a big sale in Visalia, California on April the 10th. Don't forget that. If you want some Western cattle, stockers and feeders both, Remember, April the 10th, and it's kind of a special there at Visalia, California, and you can make your online bids right here at dvauction.com, or go to the Western Video Market website, and the DV Auction console will be right there. But also, Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association's conference is this weekend. Unless something happens, I will be there on Saturday in the expo area. But let's look at your feeder cattle markets. Your real-time index on Cattle Market Central late in the day on Wednesday was down pretty heavy. You know, all the word come out. You know, they started selling those fats around 10 or 11 o'clock on Wednesday morning. They still had a lot of feeder cattle yet to sell. They started out pretty good and then waned off late in the day after they heard the news about the fat cattle trade. But your real-time index based on the 800-pound steer late Wednesday at 139.29, that was down $1.85 compared to Tuesday late. And the way you look at that real-time index, okay, the latest CME cash feeder cattle index was 142.15. It's coming lower. We're at the end of a contract month here. You guys pay attention to it, but coming lower. And then you look at the steer tracker, which is those same cattle just over the last 24 hours, and it's at 137.79. So it's coming lower more. So, you know, your steer tracker is the first thing you watch. It's at 137.79, a lot lower. Your real-time index is 7-day moving average, but it's real-time and current. It's coming right behind it. And then your CME index is always a day or day and a half behind. Now let's look at your big markets on Wednesday. OKC West, El Reno, Oklahoma, 9,600 head there. Feeder steers steady to weak. Feeder heifers $1 to $3 lower. Stocker steers, you know, the ones we've been talking about, those calf weight yearlings, some hard calves, rough wintered calves, or some lighter weight yearling cattle that are coming a year old and don't have as much size as they do age. Those are your stocker type cattle that everybody wants to buy to turn out either on graze out wheat, but more so in the Flint Hills, the Osage, and some of your big grazing areas. Those had a higher undertone, the ones that they had on offer. Calves steady and a light test on Tuesday. But you look at a quote out of there from Woodland Ag around Paris, Texas there, a lot of good wheat cattle that they run. Look at this individual quote out of El Reno. 214 head of steers, weighed 670. Now, John Cooper told me about these cattle. He said they had a great condition on them, but they were three-colored cattle, not Okie type cattle. Your Okie type cattle are English crosses. Now, these would be a tick better than those, be a tick better than number one Okies. They'd be fancy Okie type cattle, but not any thing besides solid blacks, solid reds, and some dark-nosed Charolais. But good kind of cattle, the kind of cattle that they want for the Flint Hills. And guess where they went? To the Flint Hills. 214 head, weigh 670 at 164 1/4. Marana Stockyards out in Arizona. They've got some grazing out there too. Had more rain than they've had in a long time. 52 head of Pee-wee steer calves, weighed 396. $216. That's a pretty good quote in that part of the country. Torrington livestock markets, they need stocker cattle up there too, because after all that snow and ice melts, here comes the grass. 136 head of 649-pound steers bring 179.50. And my best quote come out of my stomping grounds and all my friends at St. Joe's Stockyard, St. Joe, Missouri. They were told to get out of the premises there just a few days ago. They had to be evacuated because they didn't know if the levee was going to hold, whether they'd be flooded out or not. But the water started receding there in the Missouri River, which is just right next door, and they were able to come in there and still got about 2,000 head of cattle. But look at this quote out of St. Joe. 51 head of 727-pound steers bring $161. And that's your feeder flash for Thursday.